a lawyer and a financial advisor walk into a bar.
Oh, and then what happens, Dave?
Well, the question sort of comes out around, do you know what happens to your assets and your liabilities if you lose capacity or if you die?
Oh, that's a bit brutal. It's not a very positive one to bring up. What happens if I die? What happens if I end up in hospital or not able to make my own decisions? Well, I think if you've got a will, aren't you all sorted? Isn't that the end of the story?
No, but the reason that I reckon it's actually quite a topical one for us for
Yeah.
today is that we've got, as many people in Melbourne, Victoria would know, and probably most of Australia, that old Warnie.
Oh, yeah, the Warney story.
The
He was
Warnie story.
52, was he?
52 and just dropped dead of a
52.
heart attack. So,
Yeah, yeah,
and there's been a lot of discussion around him about the assets that he'd built over the years and the profile
yeah,
that he had and
yeah,
everything else. Now that's worst case scenario that he's deceased, and you
yeah,
can turn around and go, right, yeah, look, everything would be passed off to him. But you and
yeah,
I both work with people that are in businesses.
yeah,
And I know a lawyer will always say to a client, you want to de-risk yourself as much as possible. So
yeah,
move as many of your assets, if you can, either into another, your spouse's name, so it's not held by you personally, or
yeah,
set up as many of the assets as you possibly can in company structure or trust or a unit trust.
yeah,
So therefore, they're in those entity structures,
yeah.
but your will only handles your personal assets.
Right. Yes. Exactly. So you expect, oh well, I run a business, and when I die, all of my assets will just go to, say, my wife, and if you're running a company and your wife's not a director and not a shareholder of the business, then how does that all work? What happens? That's a conundrum, isn't it? It's more than just a will.
Correct. And so this is
Mm.
where this distinction between the loss of capacity
Yeah.
versus death. So
Yeah.
it's also
Right.
that balance as if you've lost capacity, which means that you cannot make decisions on your own behalf due to, say, an injury or an illness or some other medical condition. But it can also be if you're overseas. So
Mm.
you can have a power of attorney in place that will enable someone to sign on your behalf.
Yeah.
So that's the
Yeah.
important component. And so if you've got a company structure, you want to have the capacity, if you need it, to have someone to sign on your behalf. But if
Yeah.
worst case scenario occurs, then all of your assets, so you may have some commercial property, you
Yeah.
may have your even your super fund, self-managed super fund may own the commercial property that you operate your business out of, that's not owned by you as a personal. So Alex Martin doesn't actually own the asset. The company, Alex Martin Proprietary Limited owns the
Yeah.
company. But
Yeah.
your will only handles your personal assets. But you can give those instructions through that process to
Mm.
manage that on your behalf. But it is a
Mm.
query that we get a lot. A lot of people just sort of think, oh, well, I'll just write a will and everything will pass across. And because I own
Mm.
a company or I own a trust and my name is on it, that it will automatically pass over to a surviving
Yeah.
spouse or,
Yeah.
someone else in their family group can pick it up
I
and
think
kind
that's
of
the
deal
thing
with it.
that people don't really understand. You think, well, I've got a will, and my will deals with all my assets, and that's the end of it. But often, you own some assets personally. Your partner might own some assets
Yep.
personally. Your kids might own some assets personally. The company that you run might have some assets. There might be a family trust which has some assets, and it doesn't. You don't actually need to be running a giant multinational business to have a bunch of
No.
entities. I mean, most of my clients who are relatively small businesses in the scheme of things, they've got at least a company, at least another company that is that is the trustee of a family trust,
Hmm.
and at least some assets personally, and their partner has some assets personally. So
Yep.
you've at least got sort of four. You're filing 4 tax returns at least every year, and all 4 need to have arrangements in place for if somebody dies or loses capacity. And if you just do a will, then that might deal with your family home, which might be owned personally, but that's about it. All of it, and often these people are wealthy and successful, and a lot of their assets are tied up in unit trusts or in trusts or
Yep.
in just in a company, and that's all up for grabs or all uncertain, I suppose. And then you get it to add another level of complexity. Often you've got then a business partner or whatever. So it might be that the business partner wants to take over the business or doesn't want to take over the business or whatever. And so, you end up in real trouble. So you need a sort of an overall plan about what happens to your assets wherever they lie. And I think that's the thing that people don't understand. That they're
Yeah.
often held, and often my own clients don't understand. They go, "Oh, yeah, I've got these properties," and I say, "Oh, who owns the properties?" And they say, "I don't know. I talk to my accountant. My accountant deals with all that," which is fine. But then the accountant, you need to talk to the accountant about, well, what's the plan in place if a Shane Warne situation happens and you keel over? Because ultimately, you've worked hard your whole life to build up these assets. You want to make sure they pass on to the right people.
Yeah, and so the topic that we're talking about today, do you know what
Yeah.
happens to your assets and liabilities if you lose capacity or in the unfortunate circumstances of death? And that's a really interesting topic. And this is where you talk about, part of your estate planning process is not just upon death, but it's about that transition through, because the research really shows that something like a Shane Warne example, where it's an immediate death, is a very small percentage of the overall deaths in the world. Most death occurs either through an illness or or old age. Like, it's a longer period of time. So you may be ill.
Is this what they teach you at financial advice school?
Well, no, but it's just
it's brutal.
But this is where people sort of sometimes think that it's like, bang, it's going to happen to them immediately.
Yeah.
But that's probably more of the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah.
It is a longer kind of cycle, and
you might lose capacity along the way.
Correct. And so you may be in a coma, or you may be in a medical condition that means that you don't have the capacity at the time to make a decision on something. So I think the point you made before, it's part of that process is to make sure that the right assets pass to the right people at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just because you have a director and another director in the business doesn't mean that they will ultimately take over.
Yes.
Like that. Yeah. It just doesn't, legally. But one of the other challenges that people find is that they just sort of think it'll all be okay. But sometimes if the bank is, and your name is connected to a particular bank account that needs to control things, if that institution is aware that you're either, well, more so that you're deceased, and they hear about it, they'll lock that account.
Yeah, right. Oh, I didn't know that. And so then even if your husband or wife or partner or whatever turns up, they can't access it.
Well, so I have a primary bank account. Well, no, but I say in the situation that I'm the primary account holder of a bank account.
Yeah.
My wife has a second card on that account, so she can access it. There's no problem. But ultimately, the bank or any financial institution would look at that and say, well, David is now deceased. He's the primary account holder. All the secondary ones come connected afterwards. Once they've been advised that the individual is deceased, they then want to work out, okay, so where's probate? Where's the death certificate? We want to make sure that the person who is the primary account holder of that account is appropriately going to get passed on. So that's where we also start to look at it. People don't realise that the capacity to then service debts, so this comes back to your liabilities, may be drawing on a bank account that flows through that someone else may have closed on your behalf.
Right. So what do you do about all of that? Do you go and get a will? Obviously, everyone needs a will, especially anyone who has children. I think you need a will.
Yep.
For your personal assets, and then for all your business assets and for your bank accounts, do you go and see someone else? Go and see you?
No, because it's all wrapped together in some respects. Yes, it's all. This is a lot of discussions we have with a lot of individuals and family groups and business owners is, what would you like to see happen? And therefore, we come back to a lawyer that would then establish the legal documentation to make sure that the assets would pass through. So part of that may be reviewing your existing trust deeds and company constitutions to make sure that what the rules that sit inside that documentation supports the direction that you want to go.
Yeah. Can I tell you, as a commercial lawyer, every day of the week I get clients say to me, "Oh, this is the situation. If I die, then my business partner has to buy out the interest, and my wife gets the money." So that they tell me that, and I go, okay. And then I have a look at the documents and go, "That's not what it says here, mate." And they go, "What? No, that's what happened.
We've agreed it." We had a discussion about it.
Once you're dead, then nobody will be giving evidence about what the agreement was, right? Yeah. And the company constitution was written by Captain Cook in 1922. So
Or
it's a
there's
really
no
old
shareholder agreement
document.
that agrees
Or
to
there's
what
no-
the valuation
yeah,
of a business should be. I mean, you might say it turns over X, and so therefore it's worth this. Yeah, but if you're not there as a key person inside the organisation, the business may not be as valuable as it was previously.
Yeah, that's right. Or there may be no one who wants to take it over, or it might be more or less valueless once the key owner is gone.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah. So certainly, I'd say you got to make sure that what you think is the situation,
Yep.
and that it's part of a broader plan. And we deal with business succession a lot, but very little with personal assets. We don't deal with personal succession. That's a wills and estates lawyer. A commercial lawyer, though, will deal with business succession. So what happens if you die or are incapacitated to your business or your business assets?
Yep.
What does the unit trust deed say?
Yep.
What does the company constitution say? It's those governance documents. And just by way of background, if you've got a company, then you normally got a company constitution, and if you've got shareholders, you might have a shareholder agreement. If you've got a trust, then you'll have a trust deed. Yep. They're the documents that you should be looking at for what happens if somebody is incapacitated and died. And there's some of the key things that those documents should cover.
And it's also, which is a really important point where you say, because it's always interesting when you say to people, do you know where those documents are? What do you mean?
Yeah.
No. Where are the original documents? We need to, because there are some businesses that some of those trust deeds were written in the 70s and 80s, and the rules have really and the law has changed. So we always say it's one, you need to know where they are. Yeah. And sometimes if you can't, you can get them replaced, but that's not always to your advantage.
Oh yeah.
To have a replacement.
Getting replaced, yeah.
Correct. I mean, everything is possible, but why make it more difficult than it needs to be, especially when a person is deceased? But it's going back and reviewing those documents to make sure what you're wanting to achieve going forward, the documentation that supports your business aligns to what that is. Yeah. So we would always be suggesting to people that we review those on a regular basis. And sometimes you may look and go, that's all good. We're happy with that. No, we don't need to make any changes. Or their circumstances have changed, that they may have inherited something, or they may have become separated or divorced or widowed. Yep. And therefore, actually, what my plan was as to who that asset would pass to, or the controller of that, and that also may be a sibling or a friend who you may have, written into some of your documentation to support you in that process, is no longer.
Yeah. Certainly, I'd recommend people look at them when their life key things happen. If you have children, you got to. Things are different. If you get divorced, if someone passes away, those sort of things, they're the key times to make sure that your will's up to date, if there's any changes that you want, and then your business succession. And it's all part of a broader plan as to who you want to have to get what, I suppose, and who you want to make decisions. I mean, there might be one person who you sort of thinks like you, and that you want them to make your health decisions for you, and there might be a different person who you want to make your financial decisions, or that might be the same person or whatever, and that might change over your life. But all of those things are. These things happen every day. I found out yesterday that a colleague of mine who runs a law firm, who was 51, did a Shane Warne, dropped dead of a heart attack, just gone like that, and he was the sole owner of that business, and he's got 30 or 40 staff.
Yep.
And I don't know what's happening with it. I just sort of heard on the grapevine, I suppose, and I don't know what's happening to that business. And I hope he, as a lawyer, had some plans in place. But his partner lives overseas, his personal partner, So I don't know, I don't know what the plan is. And that business, if that business is normally run through a company or a trust, I don't know what the arrangement is. And there's even practical considerations, which I see a lot. Sometimes you've got one partner who's very heavily involved in the business, and one personal partner who's maybe at home and isn't involved, and they don't even know what the entities are, or where the bank cards are, or what who to talk to. They need to have the accountant's details, and same with your parents. You might you might at some point want to be talking to your parents about where what accountant they use or whatever it is. So if and when the time comes that you need to be involved, you know who to talk to and know where the gold bullion's hidden.
Well, see, this is where it's interesting, because we've had discussions over the years where we may have multiple directors in the room, And we'll do it, here's a scenario. Right.
Yeah.
Alex, you and I are both directors, and we've got, 2 or 3 other people in the room. And let's say you're the 60% shareholder, I'm the 40% shareholder. So you've got control, even though, and you're older than me, clearly.
Sounds good. I'm liking it so far. Yeah.
But you're older than me. Or let's reverse it. Maybe you're younger than me, but you've got this ownership structure in place. And we say, right, you've dropped dead.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah.
And people go, well, no. So where's the documentation? Who would take over authority on that? The control of various entities, the liabilities that you may have personally and from a corporate perspective. So you may have signed as a guarantee or a guarantor on a business loan.
Yeah.
Right. So all of a sudden, all of those things are in play.
Yeah.
If you're not around,
the might be called in, right?
Correct.
If no one else can take over.
Correct. And so then how do you, and then if you have that obligation, you've got employees and payroll still needs to be dealt with, and all of these issues that, they keep coming up. And I think there is. I mean, I know they were talking about the amount of males that have reached out to their medical practitioner after Warnie dropped dead of a heart attack. To come and get a checkup, because all of a sudden the reality is, they kind of you hear about these stories and you do get that uplift, but 90% of the time people just shove their head in the sand and go, oh, but it won't happen to me.
Yeah. Well, that's right, and that's a very kind of middle-aged male point of view. Everything's fine, even though they're dying all over the place, or have living unhealthy lifestyles and all the rest of it. And people just go, oh, well, if I die, my problems are solved. But you're talking about your partner, you're talking about your children, you're talking about the people in your life that you most care about and that you want a plan in place if something happens.
But you also could have worked your ass off for years in building a really successful business that is functioning beautifully. It's doing everything that you want it to do, and you're living the life that you want to. And then you can turn around and say, well, it's not just an unhealthy lifestyle. Look at the amount of people that are, these middle-aged men in Lycra, the mammals, out there on, Beach Road or somewhere else in different cities around Australia. They're cycling. Yeah. Now, I know of a number of circumstances where, for whatever reason, they get clipped by a car, bang. So it's not like they're unhealthy. They've been functioning. They've been doing what they really want to do, but for whatever reason, they're caught in an accident. And that's all it is. It is an accident which has a huge ramifications for their business and their family. And you have that discussion and say, and we always raise the question, what's really important to you? 99% of the time, most people will say family.
Yeah, they say the children. Absolutely. Yeah.
But
so, and what are your plans for your children?
I haven't got around to that part. That's where we come back to. Do you know what happens to your assets and your liabilities? One, if you lose capacity, or if you die. So as a topic, look, I mean, people. It's interesting because some people will say, "Oh my God, you're being so morbid. Why do we want to talk about this?" I said, "It's not." My view on this is that it's not being morbid. It's actually just getting you to articulate what it is that you want to occur. Because ultimately, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
I don't know when.
Yeah.
Some of us it'll be tomorrow. For some of us it'll be when we're 105. But what are you going to do through that process? And if the worst scenario did occur, what do you do? And from a legal point of view, have you had commercial situations where one business partner may have been lost capacity or deceased without any agreements in place? I mean, does that take them into...
Oh, I sure have, absolutely. I mean, plenty of times. And can I say, it's part of a broader discussion about what happens if you want to leave the business, or what happens if, it's not just necessarily if you die. And sometimes having a discussion around what happens if you die or lose capacity can give you a better idea of where, say, two business partners who are in business together, where they see their future. And one might say, oh, well, I just want to sell up everything. And the other might say, oh, hang on, I want the business to go on forever.
Yep.
And so I don't want to sell and just give money to my spouse or whatever. And they go, oh, hang on, I didn't realise that. And so sometimes it's when people say decide to leave the business, and having that discussion can help understand where people are coming from and help have procedures in place where somebody, say, voluntarily wants to leave the business. They don't die, they don't lose capacity, but they maybe one of their children gets sick, or maybe their parent passes away, or some life change happen. They get divorced. Often it's a divorce. They get divorced and they go, you know what, stuff this. I'm going to move to Barbados. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to buy a motorcycle and go and drive until I kill myself doing that
on Route 66, and away you go.
Yeah, that's right. Whatever it is, or re-partner, and then partner wants to live somewhere else, or whatever it is, and that's all fine.
But it's also the interesting one we've occasionally seen is that there may be an older business partner that brings in a younger one from a succession. So they're actually being very proactive. They're looking at how do they success themselves out of the business, but the circumstance that then occurs, unfortunately, something happens to the younger partner.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it's like, hang on, that was not meant to happen. I was meant to be leaving with the young guy coming through, but that's now changed because they've either become deceased or they've picked up an illness that has put them out of the business, and they've got to reassess their lives. So it's there's never a perfect environment. There's never a perfect situation. It's the awareness factor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, just having what they call, and this is probably something that people should be aware of, you've got your personal will, and often in business you have your governance documents, and then you often have what they call a buy-sell agreement, or it might be part of a shareholder agreement or part of a unit trust agreement. But that buy-sell means that if you and I are in business together and I die, there might be an insurance policy in place, and the business might claim on the insurance policy and then use that money to buy out my interest in the business, and then my partner might get lots of cash, and you might be able to take over the business, and everyone's happy. But so there's plenty of methods that you can put in place to navigate through this. It's not all doom and gloom. It's just a matter
and I think I agree with you. I think that's a really important point. It's not, this discussion is not to be all doom and gloom. The discussion is to bring it to the table, to then understand where and the direction that you want to go in this, which then gives you the capacity to work out, well, what are the steps that we need to take to get us in the direction that we want to go in.
Yep.
So it's actually a very positive discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, don't shove your head in the sand and go, oh, it'll all work its way out. It's like, well, that means you're leaving an issue for someone else to address if you're not here.
Yeah, and at the time when they've got their hands full dealing with grief and dealing with all sorts of problems, they go, well, here's another problem for you, which is, you're not a director of the business and I expect you to take over, even though you have no interest in the business.
But it's also on the basis, if you're running a business, you do your, planning. You plan the growth of your business, the markets you want to go to, how you need to expand. You reassess your funding requirements, you reassess your risk, in that you may look at your general insurance policies, you may look at the cars that you function, you may look at the equipment that you use. All of those things you work towards growing and building and squeezing more margin. My view on this is that it's no different than you need to be assessing, okay, what's my exit strategy? But that exit is, as we said, your buy-sell shareholder agreements is part of your exit strategy, but are there different ways to support that as the business continues to grow and as you bring in more partners along the way? Like, it's just, I don't see it as a morbid or a bad discussion. I see it as a very strategic direction that you're taking, and you're being very clear in where you are going and what you want to be doing.
Yep, and very clear about looking after the people that are most important to you, after you're gone, and probably even more broadly, if you decide to go or you decide to retire early, or you decide, if you've got something in place, you can say, oh, well, I've had enough. Often you don't, you might not be incapacitated, but you might just be wanting to retire or not interested anymore, or want to spend more time with your children and the people who you care about. And go, well, I'm just going to step away, and I know I can because I've got this agreement in place, which means that the other partners take over and they all put in to buy me out, or whatever the arrangement is. And you get
a lot of time you've put a lot of. Well, see, you've also put a lot of stuff at risk over the journey of your, growing your business. You've had personal assets, and you've provided guarantees here, and There's always been a lot at risk. It's just trying to be clear about how you manage that risk going forward.
Mm. So
do we want to? Yeah. Let you wrap it up.
No, I was going to say, to wrap it up, it's have a will, but also have structures in place, whether it's a buy-sell agreement or have the shareholder agreement or whatever company documents in place to be able to deal with your incapacity or death, or deal with your exit from the business suddenly or otherwise.
But it's also power of attorney documents, very powerful documents, and making sure that you've got someone who can sign on your behalf. Because immediate death is, as we said, is a small percentage of the overall deaths in the world. Most death occurs through either old age or an illness. Like, it's a gradual kind of process, but during that process, incapacity is an issue. Yeah.
So you need a wills and estates type lawyer to do your will and to do your powers of attorney, and potentially a commercial lawyer to help you with the business structures. Correct. And that should be part of an overall plan, which you might do with your advisor or in discussion with your partners or your partner, your personal partner.
Correct.
So they're on board for all of these things.
And as they say, once you find the documentation of your business, read it. It's always interesting when you say to someone, well, what does the deed say? Oh, I don't know. I haven't read it lately.
That's why I came to deed. People ring me up and they say, look, I've got this contractual dispute. Am I going to win? And I say, what does the contract say? And they say, oh, I don't know. No. I haven't read it. Well, that's the starting point. If you send it to me, I'll read it, and then I'll charge you so I can tell you.
Yeah. So all those important
cut out the middleman and read it yourself.
Correct.
Yeah, read the documents, absolutely. That's a great starting point. And if you're not sure what they mean, get some advice.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right, Alex, once again, the dulcet tones of Taurus Legal always working their way through.
All right, thanks, Dave. Nice to speak to everyone.
All right.
Catch you at the next one. Bye.